One of the more challenging things that you have to deal with in academia is selfish people. And I strongly believe it's actually the career that drives selfishness, where people are inward focused and that's all they care about. And I want to talk about this, and hopefully I'm going to help you process or think about what you should do with selfish people. I'm not the best at it, but I've had experience, and this is how I deal with it. So within academia, you can imagine it as a bit of it's a competitive process. So it's just a selection process. What you have to do is many people apply, very few people get in, and it's like that all the way through in all stages of the academic game. So whether it's getting into college, whether it's getting into graduate school, going on and becoming a professor. And so what this does, it leads or it sort of selects people that are prioritizing their own selves over everybody else. One of the easiest ways that you can get ahead is to act selfishly. And in the short term, I think that's really, really a strong force that drives a lot of performance, where you prioritize yourself, you prioritize everything about you over everything else, right? You push the rest of the world away, and then it's all about you. And so what ends up happening is, as you get further along, you realize that there is a lot of selfish people that selects for. One way to call that is sort of narcissistic people, right? But what it does, it has a large number of people that are trying to prioritize themselves over everybody else and focus on how that they can grab as much resources as possible, and so that they can maximize those particular resources. And I think also too is that it selects for individuals that are strategic and thinking about how to get ahead and the different ways that you can you can get ahead. So they're constantly, many people are thinking strategically, in the sense that if I do this, then somebody else is going to give something back to me in a very transactional way. And so what ends up happening is you start to get to know a lot of people that do act very selfishly with who they are and what they're about, and you sort of see the sort of transactional nature of what actually happens. And many times you'll be in a transactional relationship and you'll get burnt, right? Something will happen to you and you'll be like, why did that happen to me? And, after a lot of processing, a lot of sort of, thinking through these kind of things, I've learned to sort of deal with this in this particular fashion, right? So I think about, I can't help them. I can't change who they are. And if it's not this one particular person that is going to be very, very selfish to me, it's going to be another person. And they'll have a very transactional view of the world. And so what I end up doing is, so Dr. Les Carter's got this great YouTube channel. And the way that I've processed it is exactly what he would do. And what he talks about is you just go into gray rock mode. Right, so when I go into work, I lose much of who I am inside, right? And I just go into gray rock mode, and I'm just kind of dead to it all at this moment. And I know that sounds really, really terrible, right? When I say this out loud, and I was thinking about how do I process this? How do I tell an audience? But you just go into just gray rock. You're dead to the rest of the world. And you just simply execute when you're there. And you remove all of the emotional components, you remove everything that you have these sort of expectations, and you're just dead, right? Like just dead inside. And as you do that, and you sort of view the world in a very robotic way, right? Then these things don't necessarily harm you in any sort of way. And, how you might be thinking, well, how do you build relationships and all that kind of stuff? Frankly, I try to avoid it because it ends up being in such a inevitably there is a transactional nature to everything that you do in the academic game, and people will say there's all these sort of relationships and all this kind of stuff. It's not true, right? Because you're competing against each other. It's very strong competitive forces, and sooner or later what's going to happen is that you'll be in a relationship that will be transactional. So the stuff that I reserve, the sort of relationships where I get my emotional force, the things that drive me going forward, it's my family. It's the people that are around me that I've chose to sort of protect and build relationships with. And so if you don't have a family, right, and that's not part of your life, which lots of people are like that, right? What you end up doing is finding a friend, or maybe it's an acquaintance, that maybe it's somebody from academia that you could really deeply trust, but that's very hard to find, and that's unlikely in my view. So it ends up being somebody that's outside that you end up building a group with, right, or some sort of relationships with. And it's a way to process. The reason why I say this, it's a way to process everything that's going to happen to you and the experiences that you're going to go through and the competitive nature of what you're going to go through. I was a pretty naive individual coming into the whole academic game because I thought people were, upfront and honest and all of those kind of things. But it's not what happens, because people are acting strategically. And it's actually built into the career. There's all sorts of training to sort of act strategically. There's all sorts of these conversations that you have, like, well, how do you get ahead? What do you have to do to get publications? All these kind of things. It's actually built into the career. So you simply have to realize that when they are communicating this, when they're talking about this, they're not necessarily talking about building long-term meaningful relationships, right? They talk about building relationships, networking, and all that kind of stuff. That's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is very transactional, dead to the world relationships, right? Like absolutely dead to the world, where you just simply have to realize this is a transaction. It's not a relationship. It's not something that I would call where I would protect at all costs, right? Where I would have this sort of sense of loyalty, where I would make sure that this is I'm protecting this particular relationship, and I'm willing to sacrifice all of my time and everything for this particular relationship. And so I have learned, after many years of thinking it through, many years of sort of processing, getting help from other people, professional help, that you protect this particular inside core, that small little core, and then you think about, how can I protect this thing that gives me joy, right? So maybe it's just you, and so you protect the inside thing, right? And you put up barriers and boundaries, very large, strong boundaries that you protect. And so that means maybe it's protecting your free time, where you have things that are just for you. Maybe that is protecting, ceremonial things, and then that's what you do, right? Like going to religious ceremonies on every weekdays or weekends or whatever, right? And you protect those particular things, and you leave the rest of it to sort out itself. And that's where you're just dead to the world. You're a gray rock. There's nothing that's going on that can faze you, and you just are just like whatever, right? And I want you to sort of view it as if you were a multinational CEO, right? And if you're thinking about a multinational CEO, there's thousands of people that are involved in these organizations. And so you have to be well aware that you're going to see everything, absolutely everything, because people are weird, right? People are weird, crazy, all that kind of stuff. You're going to see all sorts of really unusual things. You just have to be dead to all of that, just dead, right? And you just carry out what it actually means to be in that particular role, as in the sense that you're a bureaucratic role. So Max Weber talked about this, right? So bureaucracy is really, really important in organizations, famous sociologist from many years ago. And so think about how you're just playing a role and that you're dead to everything else. And then your humanness, your humanity, the things that give you joy, the love, all that kind of stuff is in a different spot. And to me, I've learned how to process the world in this sort of way, in the academic game in this sort of way. And I'm learning to actually deal with it in a much more functional way that I just view it as this is the academic world, and if anything happens to me, so what, right? The things that are going to protect are me and my family, and I'm dead to everything else. I'm a gray rock to absolutely everything else. So I want you to remember that as you go through this, you're going to experience a lot of selfish people, and you're just dead to it. That's it. You are just dead to the whole experiences that you're going, and you're a gray rock, and you're just simply executing in that particular role. And then the rest of it is protected. That you, your soul, your sort of the things that you love, the things that you give you passion, the things that make you who you are, reserve that for another spot. Reserve that for you inside, and let the rest of the world play its games. All right, hopefully this helps you out. I know that this is kind of a cruel way to talk about it. I understand the sort of how this might be perceived, but you often have to do this just to get along, just so you can actually live your life in a functional way within the academic game. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.